What if I told you that the world's richest tech innovator found himself completely powerless in a place where electricity doesn't exist? When Elon Musk arrived at the Zook family farm with his AI-powered solutions, he never expected to be schooled in the true meaning of progress by people who've rejected modern technology. In a clash between Silicon Valley innovation and centuries-old wisdom, something extraordinary happened that would challenge everything Musk thought he knew about advancement. The Amish family's response didn't just surprise him, it shattered his entire worldview. What could these simple farmers possibly teach the man who's revolutionizing space travel and artificial intelligence? And why did their ancient wisdom make his cutting-edge technology suddenly seem primitive? The answer would change not just Musk's perspective, but might hold the key to humanity's future in an AI-driven world. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The autumn air crackled with tension as Elon Musk stood his ground against a gathering of stern-faced Amish men outside the Zook family's barn. Levi Zook, his weathered face flushed with anger beneath his traditional broad-brimmed hat, stepped forward from the group of 24 men. His finger jabbed accusingly at the tech billionaire who had spent the past week living among their community. "Thou brings nothing but trouble to our people," Levi declared, his voice carrying across the farmyard, filling Samuel's head with ideas about thy electric cars and solar panels. The other men murmured in agreement, their dark coats and beards creating an intimidating wall of disapproval. Eli Zook watched the confrontation from his position between his younger brother Levi and their unexpected guest. His weathered hands, calloused from decades of working the land, gripped his suspenders as he assessed the situation. The past week had shown him a different side of the English businessman, one that challenged his own preconceptions about the outside world. Hannah Zook observed from the farmhouse porch, her heart heavy with concern. She had witnessed the gradual transformation in her husband Eli's conversations with Musk, had seen the spark of understanding growing between these men, from vastly different worlds. Now, as she watched her brother-in-law Levi lead this opposition, she silently prayed for wisdom to prevail. Samuel Zook stood torn between the two groups, his young face reflecting the internal struggle of someone straddling two worlds. The previous days spent showing Musk their ways of life had awakened questions he'd long suppressed about the balance between tradition and progress. His uncle Levi's hardline stance threatened to force a choice he wasn't ready to make. "Your ways are not our ways," Levi continued, his voice rising. "We've seen what thy technology does to the English world. It pulls families apart, makes people slaves to machines instead of servants to God." The crowd pressed closer, their boots shuffling in the dirt. Elon maintained his composure, though his usual confidence wavered in the face of this unified opposition. The past week had taught him more about sustainable living and community than all his years developing eco-friendly technologies. He looked to Eli, remembering their late-night conversations about the true meaning of progress. Eli stepped forward, placing himself between his brother and Musk. The morning sun caught the silver in his beard as he raised his hands in a gesture of peace. The respect he commanded was evident in how the crowd fell silent, waiting for their elders' words. Even Levi's aggressive stance softened slightly in deference to his older brother. The tension hung in the air like the morning fog that still clung to the distant fields. Would this clash of cultures end in understanding or division? Could the wisdom of the old ways find common ground with the innovation of the new? As Eli prepared to speak, the future of this unlikely intersection between two worlds balanced on the edge of a knife. Hannah's quiet footsteps on the porch drew some eyes away from the confrontation. She moved with purpose toward the gathered men, her presence a reminder of the deeper bonds that held their community together. The simple wisdom she had shared with Musk over quiet moments in her kitchen had planted seeds of understanding that now faced their greatest test. The gathered men shifted uneasily, caught between their respect for Eli and their fear of the changes Musk's presence represented. Some clutched their hats in their hands, others crossed their arms defensively, but all waited to see how this unprecedented moment would unfold. The future of their community's relationship with the outside world hung in the balance, wrapped in questions of progress, tradition, and the true path to wisdom. The gleaming Cybertruck rolled to a stop at the edge of the Zook family farm, its angular metallic surface creating a stark contrast against the pastoral Pennsylvania landscape. For Elon Musk, this visit represented more than just another business venture. It was an attempt to understand a way of life that seemed diametrically opposed to everything he represented. Eli Zook stood at the fence line, his weathered hands resting on the wooden posts his grandfather had placed decades ago. His son Samuel shifted uncomfortably beside him, caught between curiosity and apprehension at the arrival of the world's wealthiest man. The young man's eyes betrayed a fascination with the vehicle that his upbringing told him to reject. "Father," Samuel whispered, "perhaps we should have Brother Levi here for this meeting." The suggestion hung in the air, heavy with unspoken concerns about maintaining their community's traditions. Eli's response came slowly, measured with the wisdom of years. "The English world comes to us whether we wish it or not, Samuel. Better to meet it on our terms than to hide from it." His words carried the weight of someone who had long contemplated the delicate balance between preservation and adaptation. Hannah Zook watched from the farmhouse window, her hands busy with dough but her mind focused on the scene unfolding in their front yard. She noticed how her husband's shoulders tensed slightly, a subtle tell she'd learned to read over their many years together. What would this visitor bring to their peaceful community? As Elon emerged from the vehicle, the contrast between worlds became even more pronounced. His modern attire and confident stride seemed almost alien against the backdrop of the simple farm. Yet there was something in his expression, a hint of uncertainty, perhaps even vulnerability, that suggested he came seeking more than just a business opportunity. Samuel found himself studying the visitor's face, recognizing in it the same questioning he often felt when confronting the boundaries between his Amish upbringing and the encroaching modern world. What drove a man who could travel to space to seek out those who deliberately chose a life without electricity? The moment of their meeting carried the weight of centuries of technological progress colliding with steadfast tradition. Eli stepped forward, extending his hand in the traditional manner of his people, firm, honest, and direct. "Welcome to our home, Mr. Musk. I trust your journey was safe?" The question seemed to catch Elon off guard, perhaps because it focused on his well-being rather than his wealth or achievements. He glanced back at his Cybertruck, then at the horse and buggy tethered nearby. "The journey was enlightening," he replied, choosing his words carefully. Unknown to the group, Levi Zook watched from the shadow of the barn, his jaw set in rigid disapproval. How could his brother welcome this embodiment of everything their faith warned against? The arrival of this outsider threatened to upset the delicate balance of their community's life, and Levi had appointed himself guardian of their traditions. Hannah observed the subtle dynamics playing out in her front yard, her husband's cautious openness, her son's barely contained curiosity, and her brother-in-law's distant disapproval. She knew from experience that such moments often preceded significant changes in their community's fabric. What changes would this visitor bring to their lives? The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the farm as Eli led their visitor toward the house. Each step marked the beginning of an unlikely encounter between two vastly different philosophies of progress, one racing toward the future, the other anchored firmly in the past. Yet in that moment, neither man could anticipate how their worlds would collide, challenge, and ultimately transform each other. Samuel fell into step behind them, his mind racing with questions. How would this visit affect their community? What opportunities or dangers might it present? And most importantly, how would they maintain their faith and values while engaging with a world that seemed determined to leave them behind? The group approached the farmhouse where Hannah waited, her quiet strength a cornerstone of their family's stability. The simple act of crossing the threshold would mark the beginning of a journey that would test the foundations of both their worlds. What truths would emerge when technology met tradition and progress confronted preservation? The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Zook farmyard as Elon Musk stepped out of his Cybertruck, the vehicle's angular silhouette creating a stark contrast against the traditional wooden barn. The first meeting with Eli Zook proved far different from what the tech mogul had anticipated. Eli emerged from the barn, his weathered hands brushing off traces of hay as he approached with measured steps. His deep-set eyes held none of the judgment or suspicion Elon had grown accustomed to encountering. Instead, they reflected a quiet intelligence that caught the billionaire off guard. "Welcome to our home, friend," Eli said, extending his hand. The simple greeting carried a weight of authenticity that made Elon pause. When was the last time someone had called him friend without an agenda? Their handshake bridged centuries of technological divide. Eli's calloused palm met Elon's smoother one, creating an unexpected connection that transcended their obvious differences. The patriarch's presence commanded respect not through authority or wealth, but through an intangible quality that made Elon increasingly curious. Hannah Zook appeared at the farmhouse door, her quiet presence drawing both men's attention. She nodded a greeting before disappearing inside, leaving behind an impression of graceful efficiency. The brief interaction spoke volumes about the family's dynamics, each member moving with purpose, their roles clear yet fluid. Samuel, Eli's son, approached from the fields, his young face showing hints of both worlds he straddled. His traditional clothing couldn't hide the spark of curiosity in his eyes as they darted between the Cybertruck and their unusual visitor. Would this younger generation become the bridge between these disparate worlds? The tension in the air shifted as Levi Zook emerged from around the corner of the barn. His rigid posture and tightly set jaw revealed his disapproval before he uttered a word. The younger Zook brothers' presence created ripples in the peaceful scene, highlighting the complex dynamics at play within the family. "Perhaps thee would like to see how we manage without thy modern conveniences?" Eli's question cut through the mounting tension. His words carried no challenge, only genuine invitation. The subtle emphasis on manage rather than survive spoke volumes about their self-sufficiency. Elon found himself nodding, drawn into Eli's orbit of calm certainty. The tech innovator who had revolutionized multiple industries suddenly felt like a student facing an unexpected teacher. How could someone so removed from technological progress exude such confidence in their way of life? Their conversation moved toward the barn, where Eli began explaining their farming methods. His descriptions revealed sophisticated systems of sustainability that predated modern environmental concerns. Each word carried decades of accumulated wisdom, passed down through generations and refined through practical application. Hannah's occasional contributions from the background added layers of insight to Eli's explanations. Her practical knowledge complemented her husband's philosophical approach, creating a fuller picture of their way of life. The couple's seamless partnership demonstrated a depth of understanding that transcended verbal communication. Samuel's presence during these exchanges revealed another dimension of the family dynamic. His thoughtful questions bridged the gap between Elon's technical knowledge and his father's traditional wisdom. The young man's ability to translate concepts between these two worlds proved invaluable. Levi's skeptical observations from the periphery served as a constant reminder of the challenges ahead. His resistance represented not just personal opposition, but the broader concerns of their community about outside influences. Could these different worldviews find common ground? As the day progressed, Elon found his preconceptions slowly crumbling. The simple efficiency of their methods challenged his assumptions about progress. Each explanation from Eli revealed layers of complexity hidden beneath apparent simplicity. What other wisdom might this community hold beneath its modest exterior? The initial meeting stretched into hours of fascinating discussion, touching on topics ranging from sustainable agriculture to community building. Through it all, Eli's calm wisdom continued to surprise and engage his unlikely student. The tech mogul who had come to teach found himself increasingly in the role of learner. This unexpected shift in dynamics raised intriguing questions about the nature of progress itself. What did it mean to advance? Could moving forward sometimes require looking back? As the sun began to set on that first day, these questions lingered in the air, promising more discoveries to come. The aroma of freshly baked bread and hearty stew filled the Zook family's modest dining room as Hannah methodically set the table with simple earthenware dishes. The absence of modern conveniences seemed to amplify the intimacy of the gathering, creating an atmosphere that felt both foreign and strangely comforting to Elon Musk. Hannah moved with practiced grace, her quiet efficiency speaking volumes about years of serving meals to both family and visitors. She placed a steaming loaf of bread at the center of the table, its golden brown crust catching the late afternoon light streaming through the windows. Who would have thought that such a simple setting could make the billionaire tech mogul feel so acutely aware of the stark contrast between his world and theirs? Eli took his place at the head of the table, with Hannah to his right and their son Samuel to his left. Levi, who had remained unusually quiet since Elon's arrival, sat across from the visitor, his stern gaze occasionally flickering with barely concealed skepticism. The seating arrangement wasn't lost on Elon. He found himself positioned between Samuel and Hannah, perhaps a deliberate choice to buffer any potential tension with Levi. As Hannah began serving the meal, Samuel attempted to bridge the cultural gap. "We thank God for simple provisions," he explained to Elon, his voice carrying a hint of pride mixed with self-consciousness. "Everything here comes from our land, or our community." The statement hung in the air, carrying an unspoken comparison to the world of mass production and global supply chains that Elon represented. Levi's first words since they'd gathered came sharp and pointed. "I trust our simple fare won't disappoint someone accustomed to city restaurants?" The question carried a subtle challenge, but before Elon could respond, Hannah intervened with gentle authority. "The Lord provides exactly what we need, brother." "Levi," she said, her soft voice carrying unexpected weight, "and he teaches us to share it with grateful hearts." Her words seemed to settle over the table like a blessing, temporarily smoothing the ripples of tension. Eli observed the exchange with thoughtful eyes, his weathered hands folded in preparation for grace. "Perhaps," he suggested, "our guest might appreciate learning how we thank the Almighty for our daily bread." The invitation carried no judgment, only genuine inclusion. The meal progressed with a rhythm unique to the Zook household. Between bites of Hannah's hearty cooking, conversation flowed in unexpected directions. Samuel's natural curiosity about the outside world occasionally broke through his reserved demeanor, while Levi's comments remained sparse but pointed, each one testing the boundaries of their guest's patience and understanding. Hannah's quiet observations and timely interventions revealed her role as the family's emotional cornerstone. She seemed to sense when tensions threatened to rise and skillfully redirected conversations with questions about the harvest or gentle reminders about community events. How did she maintain such delicate balance in a household of strong personalities? The simple act of sharing bread became a complex dance of cultural exchange. Elon found himself increasingly aware of the subtle power dynamics at play. Eli's gentle authority, Hannah's quiet influence, Samuel's careful navigation between two worlds, and Levi's resistant guardianship of tradition. Each spoonful of stew and piece of bread carried with it unspoken questions about progress, tradition, and the true meaning of advancement. As the meal continued, the contrast between this scene and Elon's usual dining experiences grew more pronounced. No smartphones interrupted the conversation. No urgent messages demanded attention. Time seemed to move at a different pace, measured by the shadows lengthening across the wooden floor and the gradual emptying of serving bowls. The experience challenged Elon's preconceptions about efficiency and productivity. Here, in this technology-free setting, communication flowed with a depth and authenticity that no digital interface could replicate. Could there be wisdom in this deliberate choosing of a slower, more connected way of life? The meal began to wind down, but the implications of this shared experience were just beginning to unfold. What other surprises awaited in this unlikely encounter between two vastly different worlds? How would this simple act of breaking bread together shape the relationships forming around this table? As the last morsels of Hannah's hearty meal disappeared from plates, an expectant silence settled over the Zook family dining room. Elon Musk shifted in his wooden chair, acutely aware that the next few moments could either bridge or widen the technological chasm between his world and theirs. The weight of his tablet computer seemed to grow heavier in his briefcase with each passing second. "Perhaps we should move to the workshop," Eli suggested, his weathered hands folded carefully on the table. It would be more appropriate for such discussions. The patriarch's gentle directive carried an unspoken understanding of the delicate balance they were about to navigate. Samuel helped clear the dishes, his movements quick and efficient, while Levi's stern presence lingered like a shadow at the edge of the room. The younger Zook brother had barely touched his meal, his disapproval manifesting in taut silence rather than words. In the workshop, the contrast between worlds became even more pronounced. Carefully maintained hand tools hung in perfect order. Along the walls, while through the window, a horse-drawn plow stood ready for the next day's work. How would Elon's vision of AI-driven farming find its place among these timeless implements? The challenge we face, Elon began, carefully extracting his tablet, isn't about replacing your ways but enhancing them. He paused, noting how Samuel leaned forward with interest, while Levi crossed his arms. What if we could combine your deep understanding of the land with technology that helps predict weather patterns, soil conditions, and optimal planting times? Eli's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. We have always read the land through God's signs. The wind, the birds, the feel of soil between our fingers. How can a machine know better? The question wasn't confrontational but probing, genuine in its curiosity. Elon recognized this as the crucial moment to bridge understanding. He pulled up a simple visualization of soil analysis data, deliberately, choosing an interface that emphasized natural patterns rather than complex metrics. Consider this tool as another way to read those same signs, Elon explained, his voice taking on the careful cadence he'd observed in Eli's speech. It doesn't replace your knowledge, it amplifies it. Like a magnifying glass helps us see what's already there. Hannah, who had joined them quietly, spoke for the first time since the meal. Does it require electricity? Her practical question cut to the heart of their community's constraints. That's where solar power comes in, Elon replied, grateful for the opening. Simple, self-contained units that work with nature, not against it. He proceeded to outline a system that would operate independently of the power grid, respecting the community's desire for autonomy. Samuel moved closer to examine the display, his eyes reflecting both fascination and conflict. The young ones, they already ask questions about the changing world, he said softly. Perhaps this could help us answer them while staying true to our ways. Levi's voice cut through the workshop like a scythe. And what of simplicity, of humility? These machines, they encourage pride, dependency. His words carried the weight of generations of tradition. Elon felt the room's atmosphere shift. How could he address these deeper concerns about cultural preservation while advocating for technological adaptation? The answer came from an unexpected source. Tell me, Eli interjected, his tone measured. How does this knowledge serve the community, not just the individual? The question revealed the heart of Amish values, the precedence of collective welfare over personal gain. Elon recognized the wisdom in Eli's inquiry. It wasn't just about the technology, it was about its purpose and implementation within their social fabric. He began to describe a system of shared knowledge, where insights gained could be distributed through traditional community channels, maintaining their social bonds while enhancing their agricultural practices. As he spoke, Hannah's quiet nods encouraged him to elaborate on the practical applications. Samuel's questions became more specific, focusing on how these tools could help younger farmers maintain their connection to the land. Even Levi's stance softened slightly as the discussion turned to preserving traditional farming wisdom through modern means. The conversation evolved into something more than a pitch. It became a collaborative exploration of how to honor the past while preparing for the future. But as the afternoon sun cast long shadows through the workshop windows, the hardest questions still remained unasked. How would this technology truly fit into their way of life? And more importantly, would it strengthen or weaken the bonds that held their community together? The evening sun cast long shadows across the Zook family's barn as Samuel helped clean up after Elon's presentation. His mind churned with questions that had been building throughout the demonstration, each one deeper than the last. The young Amish man's hands moved mechanically through familiar tasks, while his thoughts wandered to unfamiliar territory. The AI can predict crop yields with remarkable accuracy, Samuel mused aloud, catching Elon's attention. But what happens to the wisdom passed down through generations? His question hung in the air, weighted with centuries of agricultural knowledge. Elon paused from packing away his presentation materials, recognizing the genuine concern in Samuel's voice. The tech entrepreneur had encountered skepticism before, but this felt different, more fundamental than the usual resistance to change. The AI learns from historical data, he explained, including traditional farming practices. Samuel picked up a handful of soil, letting it filter through his fingers. Our relationship with the land isn't just about data, though. When my father taught me to feel the soil's readiness for planting, he wasn't just teaching me agriculture, he was passing down our way of life. The conversation drew the attention of Eli, who had been quietly observing from the barn's entrance. His presence added weight to Samuel's words, representing the living bridge between past and future that the Amish community embodied. Samuel speaks truth, Eli contributed. Technology may offer efficiency, but at what cost to our community's soul? Levi, who had remained after the presentation to voice his opposition, stepped forward. These machines would make us dependent on the English world, he declared, using the Amish term for outsiders. Where is the wisdom in that? Hannah's quiet voice carried from where she stood near the barn door. Perhaps we should ask not what technology can do for us, but what it might take away. Her insight cut through the tension, prompting thoughtful silence. The discussion expanded beyond mere technological capabilities into deeper waters. Samuel raised points about the impact on young people's development, questioning whether AI tools might erode the essential learning experiences that shaped character and community bonds. When I struggle with a difficult harvest, I learn patience. When I work alongside my neighbors, I learn cooperation. Can your machines teach these virtues? Elon found himself challenged to think beyond efficiency metrics and productivity gains. The Zook family's concerns touched on aspects of human development he hadn't considered in his technological innovations. How did one measure the value of a child learning perseverance through manual labor? What algorithms could account for the community bonds forged through shared challenges? Samuel's questions continued, each one revealing new layers of complexity. Your AI can tell us when to plant, but can it understand the rhythm of seasons that we feel in our bones? Can it appreciate the satisfaction of work done by hand, or the lessons learned through failure? The conversation shifted to the impact on community relationships. Samuel pointed out how traditional farming methods naturally created interdependence between families. During harvest times, the entire community came together, strengthening bonds through shared labor. Would technology, despite its benefits, inadvertently weaken these crucial social connections? Elon found himself increasingly drawn into this deeper examination of his proposals. The young Amish man's questions weren't coming from a place of ignorance or blind resistance, but from a profound understanding of what technology might inadvertently disrupt. Samuel's concerns touched on the delicate balance between progress and preservation, efficiency and experience, innovation and tradition. As the discussion continued, Hannah quietly prepared evening tea, her presence a reminder of the practical wisdom that often came through simple, daily rituals. The steam rising from the cup seemed to mirror the way their conversation had evolved, from concrete technical matters to more ethereal considerations of community, wisdom, and purpose. The exchange between Samuel and Elon represented more than just a debate about farming techniques. It had become an exploration of what it truly means to progress as a society. Could there be a middle ground where modern technology and traditional wisdom could coexist, each enriching the other? Or would the introduction of AI inevitably begin an irreversible transformation of their way of life? These questions remained unanswered as the evening deepened, but they had planted seeds of their own, seeds of doubt, reflection, and possibility in both the minds of the visitor and his hosts. The simple barn had become a forum for examining some of humanity's most complex challenges in the age of technological advancement. The morning dew clung heavily to the grass as Eli Zook led Elon Musk through the expansive farmland that had been in the Zook family for generations. The contrast between them could not have been starker. Eli's weathered straw hat and simple black attire against Elon's modern clothing. Yet there was an undeniable rhythm to their shared footsteps across the fertile soil. "What does progress mean to thee?" Eli asked, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of tradition. The question caught Elon off guard, particularly coming from someone he had initially assumed would be resistant to any discussion of advancement. The tech mogul found himself considering his response more carefully than usual, aware that his standard talking points about technological innovation might ring hollow in this setting. Their conversation meandered like the creek that cut through the Zook property, touching on subjects that revealed unexpected common ground. Eli spoke of his community's careful evaluation of new tools and techniques, explaining how each potential change was weighed against its impact on family and faith. "We are not against progress," he explained, "but we ask different questions about what moves us forward." The discussion shifted to sustainability, where Elon found himself increasingly intrigued by the Amish approach to resource management. The farm operated on principles of circular economy long before the term became fashionable in Silicon Valley. Every element served multiple purposes, from the crop rotation that maintained soil health to the careful water management systems that had sustained the community through droughts. Their walk brought them to a field where Samuel was working with a team of horses, the young man's skilled hands guiding the animals with subtle commands. Elon noticed how the father's eyes followed his son's movements with both pride and concern. The scene prompted Eli to share his thoughts on the relationship between work and purpose, challenging Elon's assumptions about productivity and efficiency. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "In thy world," Eli observed, "time is money. In ours, time is life." The statement hung in the air between them, prompting Elon to reflect on the relentless pace of his own existence. How many crucial moments had he missed in his pursuit of the next breakthrough? What wisdom might be found in this deliberate approach to living? The conversation took an unexpected turn when Eli brought up Levi's recent confrontations. Rather than dismissing his brother's concerns, Eli acknowledged the validity of questioning change while suggesting that wisdom lay in finding balance. This nuanced perspective revealed layers of complexity within the Amish community that Elon hadn't anticipated. Hannah's influence became apparent as they passed the kitchen garden she maintained. Eli shared how his wife's quiet wisdom often guided family decisions, demonstrating a form of leadership that operated without titles or proclamations. The tech entrepreneur found himself wondering about the different ways power and influence could manifest in a community. As they approached an ancient oak tree that marked the property's boundary, Eli spoke of the challenges facing his people in a rapidly changing world. The Amish patriarch didn't seek to convert Elon to his way of life, but rather invited him to consider alternative measures of progress. Could there be merit in both their approaches? What might they learn from each other? The morning's conversation left Elon with more questions than answers, but they were questions he had never thought to ask before. The simple act of walking the fields had revealed complexities about progress, community, and purpose that challenged his technological worldview. As they turned back toward the farmhouse, the sun now high in the sky, Elon realized that this dialogue with Eli was shifting something fundamental in his understanding of innovation and human connection. What neither man could fully appreciate in that moment was how their exchange would influence future decisions, both in the quiet fields of Lancaster County and in the bustling tech corridors of Silicon Valley. Could the principles of Amish discernment offer insights for ethical technology development? Would the pressing needs of the modern world find unexpected solutions in ancient wisdom? The answers to these questions remained elusive, but the seeds of understanding planted during their walk had taken root in fertile soil. As they approached the farmhouse where Hannah could be seen preparing the midday meal, Both men recognized that their conversation had only begun to scratch the surface of a much deeper dialogue about the true meaning of progress in an increasingly complex world. Hannah Zook's weathered hands moved with practiced precision as she stirred the large pot of warming milk, her movements deliberate and unhurried. Elon watched, fascinated by the methodical nature of traditional cheesemaking, so different from the automated processes he knew from modern factories. Every batch tells its own story, Hannah explained, her voice carrying the gentle cadence of someone who had performed this ritual countless times. The milk remembers the morning's weather, the grass the cows grazed upon, even their contentment during milking. Elon found himself drawn into the rhythm of her work, noting how the warm, sweet smell of fresh milk filled the kitchen. His mind, usually racing with technological innovations and future projections, settled into an unusual stillness. How many generations of Amish women had stood in the same spot, creating sustenance for their families with these same patient movements? In your world, Mr. Musk, how long does it take to make cheese? Hannah asked, adding the starter culture with careful measurements that relied more on experience than precise calculations. The question caught him off guard. Industrial processes can produce cheese in hours, he replied, suddenly aware of how clinical it sounded. We've optimized every step. Hannah nodded thoughtfully, continuing her work without judgment. And what happens to time itself when we crush it so? The question hung in the air, philosophical rather than accusatory. Here, we believe time is not something to be conquered but to be lived within. The conversation shifted as Samuel entered the kitchen, carrying fresh milk from the morning's milking. His presence bridged the two worlds represented in the room, his mother's traditional ways and Elon's modern perspective. Samuel's understanding of both realms made him uniquely qualified to translate the subtle nuances of his mother's wisdom. Mother's cheese takes 3 days to complete, Samuel explained, setting down the milk containers. Each step has its purpose, its own rhythm that cannot be rushed. The waiting is as important as the doing. Hannah began the process of separating the curds from the whey, her movements almost meditative. When we try to speed up nature's processes, what do we lose in the hurrying? She directed this question not just to Elon, but to the room at large, including her son in this moment of shared contemplation. The question resonated with unexpected depth. In Elon's world, efficiency and speed were paramount. The faster, the better. Yet here, in this sunlit kitchen, time moved differently. The Amish approach challenged his fundamental assumptions about progress and productivity. The modern world sees time as an enemy to be beaten, Hannah continued, her hands never ceasing their work. We see it as a friend who teaches us patience. She gestured to the developing curds. See how the milk transforms? It cannot be forced, it must be allowed to become. This perspective struck a chord with Elon's recent conversations with Eli. The brothers Zook, despite their differences, shared this fundamental understanding of time's role in human experience. While Levi's resistance to change came from fear, Hannah's embrace of traditional pacing stemmed from a deeper wisdom. Samuel helped his mother prepare the cheese forms, their synchronized movements speaking of years of shared experience. In our community, time is not measured by clocks alone, but by seasons, by the sun's journey across the sky, by the rhythm of work and rest. The cheese-making process continued throughout the morning, each step following naturally from the last. Hannah showed Elon how to test the curds for readiness, teaching him to trust his senses rather than rely on precise measurements. The lesson extended beyond cheese-making. It was about learning to read the natural world's signals, to work with time rather than against it. As the morning progressed, Elon found himself absorbed in this different way of experiencing time. The kitchen became a classroom where efficiency took a backseat to process, where the journey held as much value as the destination. Hannah's quiet expertise challenged his assumptions about progress and productivity, suggesting that perhaps there was wisdom in allowing things to unfold at their natural pace. The morning's lesson continued to evolve, touching on themes of patience, tradition, and the relationship between time and quality. Through Hannah's teaching, Elon began to understand that some things, whether cheese or wisdom, cannot be rushed into being. They require time to develop their full character and depth. Samuel Zook's hands moved with practiced precision as he organized his medical supplies in the small clinic attached to his family's farmhouse. Through the window he could see Elon Musk approaching, still wearing the plain clothes that had become his temporary uniform during his stay with the Amish community. The contrast between Samuel's modern stethoscope and the horse-drawn buggy parked outside embodied the daily balance he maintained between two worlds. "How does someone reconcile modern medicine with Amish traditions?" Elon asked, stepping into the clinic. The question had clearly been weighing on his mind since learning about Samuel's unique position as one of the few Amish-raised medical practitioners in the community. Samuel paused, carefully considering his response while organizing a tray of basic medical instruments. The journey to becoming a doctor had not been simple for Samuel. His father, Eli, had shown unprecedented openness in supporting his son's calling to medicine, despite the community's general wariness of higher education. Uncle Levi had strongly opposed the decision, viewing it as a dangerous step toward modernization that could erode their way of life. Yet Hannah, Samuel's mother, had quietly but firmly supported her son's path, recognizing the value of healing as a divine calling. "Medicine itself isn't at odds with our beliefs," Samuel explained, checking the supplies in his basic trauma kit. "The challenge lies in maintaining our values while using modern tools. We believe in humility, simplicity, and putting community before self. These principles guide how I practice medicine, not what medicine I practice," Elon observed as Samuel received his first patient of the day, a young Amish girl with a sprained ankle. The doctor's approach seamlessly blended modern medical knowledge with cultural sensitivity. He spoke Pennsylvania Dutch to put the child at ease, used simple splinting techniques that could be maintained without frequent clinic visits, and incorporated local herbal remedies that the family would be comfortable using. "Our people aren't against technology itself," Samuel continued after the patient left. "We evaluate each advancement through the lens of our values. Will it bring us closer together or push us apart? Will it make us more self-reliant or more dependent? Will it serve the community or just the individual?" These questions resonated with Elon, who had spent his career pushing technological boundaries. How different were Samuel's considerations from the ethical questions surrounding artificial intelligence or space exploration? Both men sought to improve lives while grappling with unintended consequences. Samuel's practice reflected this careful balance. His clinic contained basic diagnostic equipment and essential medicines, but deliberately avoided elaborate electronic systems. Patient records were meticulously maintained in handwritten ledgers. Emergency cases requiring advanced care were referred to outside hospitals, with Samuel serving as a cultural bridge between his community and the modern medical establishment. The relationship between Samuel and his uncle Levi remained strained over his career choice. Yet the young doctor's dedication to serving his community had gradually earned respect, even from the most traditional members. He had proven that one could embrace certain aspects of the modern world while remaining true to Amish values. "Hardest part isn't the medicine," Samuel shared, his voice thoughtful. "It's being present in both worlds without losing yourself in either. Each day requires conscious choices about which modern tools truly serve our purpose and which might compromise our way of life." Hannah's influence became apparent in Samuel's approach to patient care. Like his mother's lessons in cheesemaking, healing required patience, attention to detail, and respect for natural processes. Modern medicine could support these principles without overshadowing them. Through Samuel's example, Elon began to understand that the Amish approach to technology wasn't about rejection, but rather thoughtful selection. Each innovation was evaluated, not just for its practical benefits but for its impact on community, faith, and way of life. This selective adaptation allowed the Amish to maintain their cultural identity, while still addressing contemporary challenges. What other lessons could the modern world learn from this careful, community-centered approach to progress? How might Silicon Valley's rapid innovation culture benefit from considering the deeper implications of each advancement? As Samuel prepared for his next patient, these questions lingered in the air, challenging conventional assumptions about the relationship between progress and tradition. Whispers traveled faster than autumn winds through Lancaster County's Amish community. Levi Zook's determined footsteps carried him from one farmhouse to another, his message clear and unwavering. The English visitor posed a threat to their way of life. While Elon Musk's presence had initially sparked mere curiosity, Levi saw something more insidious taking root. At the Miller farm, Levi found a sympathetic ear in Elder John Miller. "Have you noticed how our young people gather around him?" Levi's words carried the weight of genuine concern. They asked questions about his world, about his machines. Even, "My own nephew Samuel seems caught in his spell." The conversation continued over fresh-baked bread and coffee, as more community members arrived, drawn by the gravity of Levi's warnings. Meanwhile, unaware of the growing opposition, Elon continued his daily interactions with Eli and Samuel. Their discussions had evolved beyond simple cultural exchange into deeper territories of faith, technology, and human nature. Hannah observed these conversations from her kitchen window, noting how the English visitor's shoulders had gradually relaxed, how his rapid-fire speech had slowed to match their measured pace of life. But the peace proved fragile. During Sunday service, Levi's influence became apparent as several families clustered together, their hushed conversations falling silent whenever Eli's family passed nearby. Samuel noticed the change first, recognizing the familiar patterns of community discord he'd witnessed in his youth. The same subtle signs had preceded other conflicts: the shunning of Jacob Stoltzfus for buying a car, the debate over Sarah Yoder's decision to seek cancer treatment in the city. Eli, too, sensed the shifting atmosphere. His position as a respected community elder meant he could not ignore the growing divide. After service, he attempted to bridge the gap, approaching several families who had been receptive to Levi's concerns. "What troubles you about our visitor?" he asked, genuine in his desire to understand. The responses revealed deep-seated fears about preservation of their way of life, about the seductive pull of the outside world, about the potential loss of their young people to modern temptations. Hannah's wisdom surfaced during an evening meal when she spoke of her grandmother's stories. "Our people have faced many storms," she reminded her family. "Each generation fears what might change us, yet our faith remains strong." Her words carried special weight, as Hannah rarely inserted herself into community conflicts. The tension manifested in subtle ways: fewer neighbors stopping by the Zook farm, children being called inside when Elon passed, a noticeable decrease in the usual friendly waves and greetings. Samuel found himself caught between worlds once again, understanding both the community's fears and the potential benefits of selective modernization he'd witnessed in his medical practice. Elon, despite his usual focus on technological solutions, recognized that this challenge required a different approach. The same determination that had driven his business successes now pushed him to understand the deeper currents of Amish life. He began asking different questions, not about what the Amish lacked in modern conveniences, but about what they had preserved that the outside world had lost. As storm clouds gathered both literally and figuratively over Lancaster County, the community stood at a crossroads. Would Levi's fears drive a wedge between neighbors who had lived in harmony for generations? Could Eli's measured approach maintain peace while allowing for necessary adaptation? How would Samuel's unique perspective influence the outcome? The answers remained unclear, but the approaching storm would force everyone to examine their beliefs, their prejudices, and their capacity for understanding those different from themselves. The simple presence of an outsider had unknowingly triggered a debate as old as the Amish themselves: how to remain separate from the world while living within it. In the Zook household, preparations began for the upcoming Harvest Festival, traditionally a time of community unity and celebration. Would this year's festival heal the growing rift, or would it become the battlefield for opposing viewpoints about tradition and change? The answer lay in the hearts and minds of each community member, as they wrestled with questions that had no easy answers. The early morning mist clung to the Lancaster County fields as dozens of Amish families converged on the Miller farm, where a weathered barn had finally surrendered to age. Elon Musk stood apart from the gathering crowd, his Tesla parked discreetly behind a row of buggies, watching the orchestrated chaos of preparation with fascination. Who would have thought that such a complex construction project could be accomplished without modern technology? Eli Zook approached Elon, his weathered hands already dusty from the morning's work. "Ready to learn something new?" he asked, a knowing smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. Before Elon could respond, Samuel appeared at his father's side, carrying wooden pegs and iron brackets. The younger Zook's presence had become a familiar bridge between Elon's world of technological innovation and the Amish community's traditional ways. The atmosphere tensed momentarily as Levi Zook walked past, his disapproving glance at Elon barely concealed. Several community members followed Levi's lead, creating a subtle but noticeable divide in the gathering. Hannah Zook, observing from where she stood with other women preparing the day's meals, shook her head slightly at her brother-in-law's behavior. As the men organized themselves into teams, Eli guided Elon toward the foundation where massive support beams waited. "Today you'll see how many hands make light work of heavy burdens," Eli explained, positioning Elon alongside Samuel and several young men. The tech billionaire found himself shoulder to shoulder with those who had likely never sent an email or used a smartphone, yet their expertise in this ancient craft was undeniable. The raising began with a prayer, led by the community's bishop. Elon noticed how Levi's voice carried particularly loud during the Amen, his eyes fixed challengingly on the outsider in their midst. But as the work commenced, individual tensions dissolved into the greater purpose at hand. The first beam rose slowly, guided by dozens of hands and voices calling out in Pennsylvania Dutch and English. Elon's muscles strained against the weight of the wooden beams, his expensive shirt soaking through with sweat. Samuel worked beside him, quietly, offering guidance on where to place his hands and when to push. The young Amish man's ability to bridge both worlds became increasingly apparent as he translated both the physical and cultural aspects of the barn raising to Elon. Hannah's voice carried across the worksite, calling out that water was available for the workers. As men paused to drink, Elon observed her subtle influence on the community dynamics. She managed to serve everyone, including those who sided with Levi, while maintaining a warm inclusivity that seemed to temporarily soothe the underlying tensions. The morning progressed into afternoon as the barn's skeleton took shape against the blue Pennsylvania sky. Elon found himself drawn into the rhythm of the work, the synchronized efforts of the community creating something that no modern construction crew could replicate in terms of speed and coordination. What could his own companies learn from this display of efficient collaboration? During a brief rest, Eli shared with Elon how barn raising served as more than mere construction projects. "We build more than barns on these days," he said, wiping his brow. "We build community, trust, and faith in each other." The words carried extra weight as Levi passed by with a group of men, their conversation dropping to whispers. Samuel joined them, his face showing the strain of physical labor, but also something deeper, the weight of being caught between tradition and change. "The English world sees us as living in the past," he said, using the Amish term for outsiders. "But there's future in our past too, isn't there?" The question hung in the air, carrying implications beyond the day's work. As the afternoon wore on, the barn's structure continued its skyward climb. Elon found himself increasingly integrated into the workflow, his initial awkwardness replaced by a growing sense of connection to the process. Even some of Levi's supporters began including him in their coordinated efforts, the shared labor seemingly more important than their previous reservations. The raising revealed layers of community organization that fascinated Elon's analytical mind. How had these people developed such an efficient system without project management software or modern communication tools? What could this teach him about human cooperation and productivity? As another beam settled into place with perfect precision, these questions multiplied in his mind. In the fading light of a late autumn afternoon, Samuel Zook found Elon sitting alone on a wooden bench outside the newly raised barn, his fingers absently tracing patterns in a worn leather notebook. The day's communal effort had left everyone exhausted, yet there was something different about Elon's contemplative silence, a restlessness that seemed to pulse beneath his stillness. Does thee find what thee seeks in those pages? Samuel's quiet question drew Elon from his reverie. The tech mogul's eyes held a familiar gleam that Samuel had come to recognize during their time together, the look of someone whose mind wandered far beyond the present moment. I've been thinking about parallel worlds, Samuel, Elon began, his voice carrying an undertone of carefully contained excitement. Today, watching your community raise this barn, the precision, the coordination, the unspoken understanding, it reminded me of neural networks, of how systems can work in perfect harmony when properly aligned. Samuel settled beside him, his practical farm work weathered hands forming a stark contrast to Elon's notebook. How does thee see these worlds connecting, the one of circuits and the one of sawdust? Elon's response came with unexpected vulnerability. What if the greatest challenge isn't creating new technology, but understanding when not to? Your community has mastered something my world constantly struggles with, the ability to distinguish between progress and wisdom. Their conversation deepened as Elon shared his vision of neural links, artificial intelligence, and space exploration. Yet with each technological marvel he described, Samuel posed thoughtful questions that cut to the heart of human experience. When he speaks of connecting minds through machines, what becomes of the silent understanding we witness today? The kind that needs no words? The exchange between them took an unexpected turn when Samuel revealed his own secret interest in technology, carefully hidden from his family. Late at night, he would sometimes visit a neighbor's English friend, learning about computers and the internet. It calls to me like a siren, Samuel admitted, but I fear what embracing it might cost our way of life. This confession created a moment of profound connection between the two men. Elon found himself reconsidering his assumptions about progress, while Samuel wrestled with questions that threatened the foundation of his beliefs. Their dialogue expanded beyond simple dichotomies of old versus new, traditional versus modern. Perhaps, Elon mused, the future isn't about choosing between worlds but finding ways to preserve what's precious while embracing new possibilities. He shared stories of indigenous communities using modern tools to protect ancient traditions, and of tech companies learning from age-old wisdom about community and connection. Samuel's response carried the weight of someone standing between worlds. We fear not the technology itself, but the way it can separate people from their true selves from each other. Yet I wonder, could it also bring understanding between different ways of life? Their conversation was interrupted by approaching footsteps. Levi Zook emerged from the shadows, his presence a reminder of the tensions that existed between tradition and change. The moment crystallized the complex dynamics at play, Samuel's hidden curiosity, Elon's evolving perspective, and the community's resistance to outside influence. As they parted ways, both men carried new questions. For Elon, the challenge of balancing innovation with wisdom became more nuanced. For Samuel, the possibility of bridging seemingly incompatible worlds offered both hope and uncertainty. Their shared understanding had grown, but so had their awareness of the delicate nature of progress. The digital dreams they discussed that evening would continue to echo through their interactions, raising questions about the true meaning of advancement and the price of progress. Could there be a future where the warmth of human connection and the cool efficiency of technology coexisted in harmony? The answer remained elusive, but the conversation had planted seeds of possibility in both their minds. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen windows as Hannah Zook's practiced hands worked the bread dough with methodical precision. Elon watched, fascinated by the rhythmic motion that seemed both ancient and timeless. Who would have thought that the simple act of bread making could captivate someone who spent his days contemplating neural networks and space travel? Would you like to try? Hannah's soft voice broke through his reverie. Her offer surprised him. Throughout his stay, she had remained quietly in the background, speaking little but observing much. Her gentle presence had become a constant reminder of the unhurried pace of Amish life. As Elon stepped forward, Hannah guided his hands into the soft dough. Not too hard, she instructed, her voice carrying years of experience. The dough is like a living thing. It needs gentle persuasion, not force. The metaphor wasn't lost on Elon, who had spent years trying to force technological solutions onto human problems. The kitchen filled with the earthy scent of yeast and flour as Hannah shared her bread-making wisdom. "See how the dough responds to patience?" she asked, demonstrating the proper technique. "Push too hard and it fights back. Work with it, and it yields naturally." Her words carried weight beyond the immediate task, touching upon something deeper that had been troubling Elon since his arrival in the community. Through the window, they could hear the distant sound of Samuel and Eli working in the fields, their voices carried on the morning breeze. The contrast between this scene and Elon's usual environment of corporate boardrooms and engineering labs couldn't have been more striking. Yet somehow, in this moment, the disparity felt less like a divide and more like two sides of the same coin. Hannah's quiet wisdom continued to flow as they worked the dough together. "Every loaf tells a story," she explained, showing him how to fold and turn. "The way it rises, the texture it takes, these things speak of the hands that shaped it and the patience that went into its making." Her words resonated with Elon's own creative process, though his creations were of a very different nature. As they worked, Hannah shared stories of raising Samuel, of watching him navigate between two worlds. Her perspective offered new insights into the young man who had become such an unexpected bridge between Elon's world and the Amish way of life. What would it be like, Elon wondered, to raise a child in this environment, where the pace of life moved in harmony with the seasons rather than the relentless tick of digital clocks? The conversation turned to change, a subject that had been at the heart of many discussions during Elon's stay. "Change is like this dough," Hannah observed, pressing her fingers into the yielding surface. "It happens whether we wish it or not. The question is whether we work with it or against it." Her words carried none of the resistance Elon had encountered from Levi, nor the cautious optimism of Eli. Instead, they reflected a deep understanding of life's natural rhythms. As the morning progressed, Hannah shared more than just bread-making techniques. She spoke of community, of the intricate web of relationships that sustained their way of life. Her stories revealed how the Amish approached problems, not through technological solutions, but through the strength of their connections to one another. Could there be lessons here for the increasingly isolated modern world? The dough finally reached its perfect consistency, and Hannah showed Elon how to shape it into loaves. "Now we wait," she said, covering them with clean cloths. "The best things can't be rushed." The statement hung in the air, challenging Elon's instinct for rapid innovation and immediate results. Through the simple act of making bread, Hannah had managed to convey profound truths about patience, community, and the nature of change itself. As they cleaned the flour from their hands, Elon found himself wondering about the many other lessons hidden within this seemingly simple way of life. What other wisdom might be found in these quiet moments? Away from the ceaseless hum of technology, the kitchen filled with the promising aroma of rising bread, a testament to their morning's work. But the real product of their time together wasn't just the loaves taking shape under the cloth. It was the understanding that had risen between them, as natural and necessary as the bread itself. As morning dew settled on the farmland, Zook found Elon examining the solar panels he'd helped install days earlier. The young Amish man's footsteps carried an unusual urgency across the damp grass, drawing Elon's attention away from his calculations. What brought Samuel here so early, before the community's usual sunrise activities? "The panels are working better than expected," Elon offered, misreading Samuel's concerned expression. "The energy storage system should help during the winter months when..." "There's trouble brewing," Samuel interrupted, his voice low despite their isolation. "Uncle Levi has been speaking with other families, particularly the council elders." The weight of his words hung in the morning air, carrying implications that transcended their simple meaning. Who else had Levi influenced against their sustainable energy project? Samuel's fingers nervously traced the brim of his traditional straw hat as he continued. "He's convinced several families that these changes threaten our way of life. It's not just about the solar panels anymore. It's becoming A referendum on our entire relationship with the English world. Elon's mind raced through the potential ramifications. The project had already gained momentum, with several families expressing interest in similar installations. How quickly could fear and suspicion unravel weeks of careful progress? The morning sun cast long shadows across the field, mirroring the growing divide within the community. Your father seems supportive, Elon ventured, thinking of Eli's quiet but steady backing. But Samuel's slight headshake suggested complications beyond simple opposition. Father walks a delicate line as a community leader. He believes in finding balance, but Uncle Levi speaks to deep-seated fears about losing our identity. Samuel's words carried the weight of generations of tradition colliding with modern necessities. Some view these panels as the first step toward a slippery slope. The conversation shifted to the broader implications of their work. Samuel revealed how discussions at recent community gatherings had grown heated, with families taking sides in ways that threatened the tight-knit fabric of their society. Could technology truly tear apart bonds forged through centuries of shared beliefs and practices? Hannah, your mother, she mentioned something similar yesterday, Elon recalled, thinking back to their conversation in the kitchen. Though she spoke in parables about seeds and harvest times, the memory of Hannah's gentle wisdom offered a sharp contrast to the current tension. Samuel nodded, understanding flowing between them. Mother sees clearly, but she speaks carefully. She knows the real danger isn't the technology itself. It's how fear of change can poison even the strongest communities. The young Amish man glanced toward the community buildings in the distance, where early morning activities were beginning. There's talk of calling a special council meeting. When that happens, every family will have to take a stand. The implications hung heavy between them. Would their attempt to bridge two worlds end up creating an unbridgeable chasm? Elon considered the complex web of relationships he'd stumbled into. What had started as a straightforward technical project had evolved into something far more nuanced. How could he help without becoming the catalyst for deeper division? What does your father suggest? Elon asked, recognizing that Eli's wisdom might offer the clearest path forward. Samuel's response carried both hope and caution. Father believes we must find a way to demonstrate that embracing certain technologies doesn't mean abandoning our values, but the path to that understanding. Samuel's voice trailed off as a horse and buggy appeared on the distant road. Uncle Levi approaches. The warning had served its purpose, but now came the harder question. How could they navigate this growing storm without tearing apart the very community they aimed to help? As Samuel hurried away, leaving Elon alone with the gleaming solar panels, the morning sun finally broke through the clouds, casting both light and shadow across the farmland. Would this technology bring illumination to the community? Or would it cast longer shadows of division? The autumn moon cast long shadows across the guest house where Elon lay awake, his mind churning with thoughts that refused to settle. Samuel's warning earlier that day had struck deeper than he'd expected, forcing him to confront questions he'd long buried beneath layers of ambition and technological pursuit. Through the window, the gentle clop of horse hooves caught his attention, a late-night buggy returning from what was likely an emergency call to a neighboring farm. The simplicity of the sound stood in stark contrast to the complexity of his own world, where the constant hum of servers and the endless ping of notifications had become his lullaby. What had Eli meant during their conversation in the barn about building bridges to nowhere? The phrase haunted him, especially as he reflected on his latest ventures. How many of his innovations truly served humanity's needs, and how many simply fed an insatiable appetite for novelty? The Zook family, particularly Hannah's quiet wisdom, during their brief interactions had begun to crack the protective shell he'd built around these doubts. Samuel's position between two worlds suddenly seemed less like a burden and more like an enviable balance. The young man navigated between tradition and progress with a grace that Elon found himself yearning to understand. Perhaps that's what made Levi's antagonism so difficult to bear. It represented a wholesale rejection of the world Elon had helped create. The sound of distant thunder rolled across the countryside, and Elon found himself counting the seconds between lightning and sound. a childhood habit he'd almost forgotten. When had he last taken time to simply listen to a storm? His phones lay silent on the bedside table, their screens dark for the first time in years, yet their presence felt like an accusation. Hannah's words from earlier that week echoed in his thoughts. Sometimes the loudest voices come from the quietest moments. At the time, he'd nodded politely, but now, in the stillness of the Amish night, their meaning began to crystallize. How many crucial insights had he missed in his relentless pursuit of the next breakthrough? The rain began to fall, its rhythm on the roof creating a meditation of its own. Elon considered the contrast between this moment and his usual sleepless nights spent poring over production reports and design specifications. Here, in this simple room with its hand-sewn quilts and oil lamp, he felt both more exposed and more protected than he had in years. A particular memory surfaced. Eli's face as he demonstrated how to properly harness a horse, his weathered hands moving with practiced certainty. The animal knows when you're not present in your actions, he had said, just like people know when you're not present in your words. How many meetings had Elon attended while his mind raced ahead to the next challenge, the next project, the next revolution? The growing tension in the community that Samuel had warned about seemed to mirror Elon's internal struggle. Just as his presence had disrupted the delicate balance of Amish life, perhaps his relentless push for progress had disrupted something fundamental in himself. Levi's hostile glares carried an uncomfortable truth. Innovation without wisdom could become destruction in disguise. A floorboard creaked somewhere in the house, and Elon found himself wondering about the generations of feet that had walked these same planks, each step carrying its own weight of decisions and doubts. The Amish way of life, which he had initially viewed as a curious anachronism, now presented itself as a carefully considered choice, not a rejection of progress, but a thoughtful evaluation of its cost. The question that had been forming in his mind finally crystallized. What if the next great innovation wasn't a technological leap forward, but a step back towards something essential that had been lost? The thought felt almost heretical coming from someone who had built his life on pushing boundaries and breaking barriers. Lightning flashed again, briefly illuminating the simple furnishings of his room. In that moment of clarity, Elon realized that his sleeplessness wasn't just about Samuel's warning or the community's tension. It was about confronting the possibility that he had been asking the wrong questions throughout his career. Instead of, "What's next?" perhaps he should have been asking, "What's necessary?" As the storm continued its natural percussion overhead, Elon reached for his journal, not one of his phones, and began to write. The words flowed with an urgency he hadn't felt since his earliest days of entrepreneurship. But these weren't business plans or technical specifications. These were questions about purpose, about balance, about the true meaning of progress. The soft glow of oil lamps pierced the pre-dawn darkness as the Zook family gathered for their morning devotions. Elon, having spent a restless night contemplating his conversation with Eli, found himself drawn to the quiet solemnity of the moment. How could such simplicity hold such profound meaning? Eli's gentle invitation to join their morning ritual had come as a surprise, breaking with traditional Amish privacy during prayer time. The family assembled in the main room, with Hannah quietly arranging wooden chairs in their familiar pattern, while Samuel helped his father retrieve their well-worn family Bible, its pages softened by generations of daily use. Levi's arrival created a momentary tension, his disapproving glance at Elon's presence speaking volumes about his feelings toward this unprecedented inclusion of an outsider. Yet Eli's calm authority prevailed, as it often did in family matters. What would transpire in this intimate family moment? The morning devotions began with a hymn, sung in German, its melody hauntingly beautiful despite Elon's inability to understand the words. Hannah's clear voice carried the tune while Samuel harmonized with his father, creating a tapestry of sound that seemed to transcend the simple farmhouse walls. Even Levi's initial resistance appeared to soften as the familiar rhythms of worship took hold. Eli opened the Bible, its pages illuminated by the flickering lamplight, and began reading in Pennsylvania Dutch. Though the words were foreign to Elon, The cadence and reverence in Eli's voice conveyed a depth of meaning that transcended language barriers. What secrets lay hidden in these ancient texts that had sustained this community for generations? Samuel, noticing Elon's intense focus, quietly translated key passages, revealing themes of humility, service, and the importance of community. These concepts, so different from the individualistic drive that had propelled Elon's success, stirred something deep within him. Could there be wisdom in this collective approach to life and purpose? The prayer that followed was offered in English, a conscious choice by Eli that didn't go unnoticed by his brother. Levi shifted uncomfortably as Eli spoke of guidance, wisdom, and the blessing of new friendships. Hannah's gentle hand on her brother-in-law's arm seemed to calm his unease, demonstrating her quiet but effective role in maintaining family harmony. As the prayer concluded, the morning light began to filter through the windows, casting long shadows across the room. The transition from darkness to dawn paralleled Elon's internal journey, as new understanding began to illuminate previously shadowed corners of his consciousness. What other revelations awaited in this unexpected sanctuary? The family's post-prayer routine unfolded with practiced efficiency. Hannah moved toward the kitchen to begin breakfast preparations, while Samuel and Levi headed out to start the morning chores. Yet Eli remained seated, gesturing for Elon to stay as well. The patriarch's weathered face held a knowing expression that suggested their most important conversation was yet to come. The morning's devotional experience had revealed something crucial about the Amish approach to life. Their faith wasn't just a set of beliefs but a lived experience that permeated every aspect of their existence. The seamless integration of spiritual practice with daily life challenged Elon's compartmentalized worldview. How had he never noticed the artificial boundaries he'd created between his own beliefs and actions? Eli's voice broke through Elon's contemplation, soft but clear in the morning stillness. Sometimes, he began, the most important prayers are the ones we don't speak aloud. His words carried the weight of generations of wisdom, suggesting that perhaps the greatest insights come not from the words themselves, but from the spaces between them. The morning devotions had opened a window into the soul of Amish life, revealing a depth and complexity that defied simple categorization. As Hannah's breakfast preparations created familiar domestic sounds in the background, Elon found himself wondering about the other revelations that awaited him in this unexpected journey of discovery. What other treasures lay hidden beneath the surface of this seemingly simple way of life? The sun continued its ascent, marking the beginning of another day in the Zook household. But for Elon, this morning had already become a milestone in his ongoing journey of understanding, not just of the Amish way of life, but of himself. What other transformations would this day bring? As dawn's first light filtered through the windows following morning devotions, Samuel Zook found himself caught between two worlds yet again. The previous day's tensions between his uncle Levi and their visitor Elon Musk still lingered in the air like morning mist, refusing to dissipate. What would it take to bridge this seemingly insurmountable divide between progress and tradition? Samuel approached his father Eli, who stood quietly by the barn door, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. "Father, I've been thinking about what Uncle Levi said yesterday, and about Elon's perspectives on technology. Perhaps there's a way forward that honors both paths." Eli turned to his son, curiosity evident in his eyes. The morning light caught the silver in his beard as he considered Samuel's words. "Tell me more, my son. What does thy heart say about this matter?" Meanwhile, Hannah observed the exchange from the kitchen window while preparing breakfast. Her intuitive understanding of her son's struggle evident in her gentle expression. She had always known Samuel carried a unique burden, the ability to see value in both the old ways and the new. Samuel began outlining his proposal, his voice gaining confidence as he spoke. What if we could adapt some of Elon's ideas about sustainable energy, but implement them in ways that align with our values? Solar panels, for instance, harness God's gift of sunlight without requiring connection to the outside world's power grid. Elon, who had been helping with morning chores nearby, overheard the conversation and approached cautiously, mindful of yesterday's confrontations. The concept intrigued him. Could there be a way to merge technological advancement with the Amish Commitment to simplicity and community? Your community already uses solar panels for some basic needs, Elon observed, joining the conversation. What if we explored expanding their use in ways that preserve your independence while increasing sustainability? Eli stroked his beard thoughtfully, considering the implications. The proposal touched upon the heart of Amish adaptability, the careful evaluation of new technologies based on their impact on family and faith, rather than outright rejection of all progress. Levi, approaching from the fields, caught the tail end of the discussion. His initial frown softened slightly as he listened to Samuel's carefully reasoned arguments. Could there be merit in this middle path his nephew proposed? Hannah emerged from the house bringing fresh coffee for the men. Her presence seemed to ease the tension as it often did. Perhaps, she offered quietly, we should remember that wisdom can come from unexpected sources, and that God's light shines through many windows. The group fell silent, contemplating Hannah's words. Samuel's proposal represented more than just a practical solution. It symbolized the possibility of finding common ground between seemingly opposing worldviews. But would it be enough to satisfy both the traditionalists like Levi and progressive thinkers like Elon? The conversation shifted to specific details, with Samuel drawing diagrams in the dirt with a stick. He outlined how solar technology could power essential farm equipment while maintaining the community's independence from the outside world. Elon listened intently, occasionally offering technical insights but remaining mindful of the delicate balance between innovation and tradition. Eli watched his son with pride, recognizing the wisdom in seeking middle ground. The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the farmyard as the discussion continued. Could this compromise represent a new chapter in the relationship between the Amish way of life and the modern world? The proposal sparked further questions. How would such changes affect daily life? What boundaries would need to be established? How could the community ensure that technological adaptations serve their values rather than undermining them as way? The group discussed these questions. A subtle shift occurred in their dynamic. Levi's rigid stance began to soften, while Elon's enthusiasm for technological solutions became tempered with a deeper appreciation for the Amish perspective on progress. Samuel's role as a bridge between these viewpoints grew more apparent, his understanding of both worlds proving invaluable. Hannah's quiet wisdom continued to influence the conversation, her occasional comments helping to ground the discussion in practical reality rather than abstract theory. Her presence reminded everyone that at the heart of this debate lay the future of real families and communities. The morning's exchange revealed something profound about the nature of progress itself. Perhaps true innovation wasn't always about radical change, but sometimes about finding thoughtful ways to adapt, while preserving what matters most. Could Samuel's compromise offer a model for other communities grappling with similar challenges? The autumn morning brought an unusual gathering to the Zook family farm as Samuel prepared to demonstrate his modified soil sensor system. The device, stripped of its wireless capabilities and equipped with simple LED indicators, represented weeks of careful consideration and compromise between modern efficiency and Amish values. Elon watched with genuine curiosity as Samuel knelt in the rich Pennsylvania soil, explaining the basic principles to his father Eli and Uncle Levi. The tension between the brothers remained palpable, though somewhat softened by recent events. Hannah stood quietly beside her husband, her weathered hands folded in her apron, eyes sharp and attentive to both the demonstration and the subtle dynamics between her family members. The sensors measure moisture content and basic soil nutrients, Samuel explained, his voice carrying a mixture of pride and uncertainty. When the light shows red, it means the soil needs attention. Green indicates optimal conditions. The simplicity of the system struck Elon as elegant, reminiscent of early engineering solutions that prioritized function over complexity. Levi's skepticism manifested in his crossed arms and furrowed brow. And how does this differ from the wisdom our fathers passed down? Can't we tell by touching the soil, by observing the plants themselves? His questions, though pointed, lacked their usual edge of hostility. Eli stepped forward, running his fingers through the soil near the sensor. Brother, Remember when Father taught us about the different shades of earth? How moisture changes its color? He glanced at Samuel's device, then back at the soil. Perhaps this is just another way of seeing what we already know. The observation sparked an unexpected dialogue about the nature of knowledge and tradition. Hannah, who had remained silent, spoke with quiet authority. We use thermometers to check for fever, though our hands can feel heat. We use measuring cups for baking, though our grandmothers used their palms. Tools need not replace wisdom. They can confirm it. Elon found himself drawn into the conversation, recognizing parallels between this simple demonstration and his own journey with technology. Sometimes the most powerful innovations are those that enhance our natural capabilities rather than replace them, he offered, careful to frame his thoughts within the context of Amish values. Samuel's demonstration continued, moving to different sections of the field. Each location revealed slightly different readings, creating a map of soil conditions that aligned remarkably well with Eli's years of farming experience. The validation of traditional knowledge through modern tools began to shift the atmosphere from skepticism to cautious interest. Levi, though still reserved, began asking more practical questions about maintenance and reliability. What happens when it breaks? We can't be dependent on English repairmen. His concern reflected a deeper worry about preserving community self-sufficiency. Samuel had anticipated this question. I've designed it to be serviceable with basic tools, Uncle. The parts are simple, mostly mechanical. We can maintain it ourselves, just like our plows and presses. His response showed careful consideration of Amish principles of independence and simplicity. The morning's demonstration evolved into a broader discussion about the boundaries between useful tools and unnecessary complications. Hannah, moving between family members with cups of water, contributed observations that connected daily life to larger principles. Her presence seemed to ground the technical conversation in practical wisdom. Eli's role as mediator became increasingly apparent as he helped translate Samuel's technical explanations into familiar agricultural terms. His ability to bridge the gap between innovation and tradition offered a model for how change might be integrated without disrupting community values. The experience revealed something unexpected to Elon: how technology could be stripped down to its essential purpose without losing its utility. This lesson in simplification challenged his usual approach to innovation, suggesting new possibilities for technology that served human needs without dominating human experience. As the morning progressed, the demonstration became less about the soil sensors themselves and more about the process of evaluating new tools through the lens of community values. The Zook family's careful consideration of innovation offered insights into how traditional societies might thoughtfully engage with modern solutions while preserving their core principles. What began as a simple demonstration evolved into a living example of how families and communities might navigate the complex territory between tradition and progress. The soil sensors, humble as they were, became a catalyst for deeper understanding between generations and worldviews. Could this model of thoughtful adaptation offer lessons for other communities grappling with technological change? How might the principles of simplicity and community-centered innovation inform the broader conversation about technology's role in society? The morning sun cast long shadows across the Zook farmhouse as word spread through the community about an emergency council meeting. Levi Zook had called for an unprecedented gathering of the elders to discuss what he termed the English disruption, a thinly veiled reference to Elon Musk's presence in their midst. As families arrived in their buggies, the tension was palpable. The usual warm greetings and easy conversation were replaced by hushed whispers and concerned glances. Hannah Zook watched from her kitchen window, her hands mechanically kneading bread dough while her mind wrestled with the implications of what was to come. How had a simple soil sensor demonstration created such discord in their peaceful community? Inside, the main meeting hall, the wooden benches filled quickly with community members. Eli Zook sat stoically in the front row, his weathered face revealing nothing of the turmoil he felt watching his younger brother Levi stand before the gathering. Samuel, positioned between his father and uncle, felt the weight of his dual roles. more heavily than ever. Could he bridge the widening gap between tradition and progress? Levi's voice carried clearly through the hall as he addressed the assembly. "We have always been careful about outside influences," he began, his words measured but sharp. "But now we find ourselves entertaining ideas that threaten the very fabric of our way of life." His gaze swept across the room, lingering momentarily on Eli before continuing. "This English visitor speaks of progress, of technology, of change. But what of our children? What of our traditions?" The murmurs that rippled through the crowd reflected the community's divided opinions. Some nodded in agreement with Levi's words, while others shifted uncomfortably, recalling how Elon's soil sensors had already helped several farms identify problems they hadn't known existed. The simple technology had saved more than one field from potential crop failure. Elon, seated quietly at the back of the hall, felt the weight of every glance cast in his direction. He had faced hostile boards of directors and skeptical investors throughout his career, but this was different. These people weren't questioning his business acumen or technological innovations. They were questioning whether his very presence threatened their way of life. Hannah's quiet voice cut through the tension as she rose to speak, surprising many who knew her as traditionally reserved in such gatherings. "We have always taught our children that wisdom can come from unexpected places," she said, her calm words drawing attention. "Did not our own ancestors once face similar questions when they first adopted the steel wheel? When they decided which modern tools were acceptable and which were not?" The reference to their community's history of thoughtful adaptation sparked a new wave of discussion. Samuel watched as faces around him reflected internal struggles, the pull between preservation and adaptation, between fear and possibility. Could there be a middle ground that honored both their traditions and the potential benefits of careful progress? Eli stood next, his presence commanding immediate attention. Years of leadership had earned him the respect of even those who disagreed with him. "Our strength has never been in blind rejection," he stated, looking directly at his brother Levi. "It has been in careful discernment, in understanding the difference between tools that serve our community and those that would master us." The debate continued as community members rose to share their thoughts, concerns, and experiences. Some spoke of fields saved by the soil sensors, while others expressed fear about where such changes might lead. Through it all, the underlying question remained unspoken but clear. Could their community maintain its identity while selectively embracing helpful innovations? As the discussion intensified, Samuel found himself studying the faces around him. He saw the worry lines on his Uncle Levi's forehead, the quiet strength in his mother's stance, the thoughtful consideration in his father's eyes. Each person in the room carried their own version of the community's future in their hearts. Who would ultimately decide which vision would prevail? The council meeting stretched on, becoming more than a simple vote about one outsider's presence. It evolved into a deeper examination of the community's values, its ability to adapt while maintaining its core principles, and its approach to an ever-changing world beyond their fields. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the meeting hall's windows, the community faced its moment of decision. What would they choose, and how would that choice shape their future? The community hall buzzed with tension as Eli Zook rose from his wooden bench, his weathered hands gripping the edge of the table before him. The faces of his fellow Amish community members reflected a mix of concern, curiosity, and in some cases, barely concealed hostility. His brother Levi's call for Elon Musk's expulsion had created a ripple of unease through their typically peaceful settlement. "Brothers and sisters," Eli began, his voice carrying the weight of decades of respect earned within the community. "We stand at a crossroads that tests not just our traditions, but the very essence of our faith." His eyes met those of Hannah, who sat quietly in the women's section, her steady gaze offering silent support. Levi shifted impatiently in his seat, his stern expression a stark contrast to the thoughtful demeanor of his older brother, the younger. Zook had always been the more rigid adherent to tradition, viewing any deviation as a threat to their way of life. "The Englisher brings discord to our community," Levi interjected, his words sharp and decisive. Samuel Zook watched the exchange from his position near the door, his own internal struggle mirroring the larger conflict playing out before him. As someone who had experienced both worlds, he understood the delicate balance between preservation and adaptation that his father now sought to maintain. Our ways are not meant to wall us off from the world, Eli continued, addressing the gathered assembly. They are meant to guide us in living righteously within it. He paused, allowing his words to settle among the congregation. When we welcomed Elon Musk into our midst, we did not compromise our beliefs. We demonstrated them. Hannah's quiet wisdom echoed in Eli's mind as he spoke, remembering their conversation from the previous evening. Sometimes, she had said, God sends us challenges not to test our resistance but our capacity for understanding. Her insight, as always, had helped shape his perspective on the matter. The assembly stirred as Eli moved to address the specific concerns that Levi had raised. Some among us fear that his presence threatens our children's faith, that his modern ways will tempt them from our path. He acknowledged the worried glances exchanged between parents. But what stronger testimony to our faith can we offer than to stand firm in our convictions while showing kindness to those who live differently? Levi rose abruptly, his face flushed with emotion. Brother, you speak of kindness, but what of protection? What of preservation? His words carried the weight of genuine concern, despite their confrontational tone. This man represents everything we have chosen to live without. The tension in the room heightened as Eli turned to face his brother directly. Their relationship, strained by differing interpretations of their faith, had never faced such a public test. Samuel watched his father and uncle, understanding that this moment would define more than just Elon's fate within their community. Indeed, we have chosen to live without many modern conveniences, Eli acknowledged, his voice remaining measured. But we have never chosen to live without compassion, without the opportunity to learn from those God places in our path. He gestured to the assembly, including them all in his appeal. What if in turning him away we turn away a chance to demonstrate the strength of our convictions? The murmurs among the gathered families grew thoughtful rather than hostile. Hannah's subtle nod from her seat encouraged Eli to continue, even as Levi's expression darkened. The community's response would determine not just Elon's future among them, but potentially the direction of their relationship with the outside world. We are not called to isolate ourselves completely, Eli pressed on, but to live as examples of faith and simplicity in a complex world. Perhaps this situation offers us an opportunity rather than a threat. He paused, allowing his words to resonate through the hall. In showing Elon our ways, might we not also learn something about the strength of our own convictions? The assembly sat in contemplative silence, weighing Eli's words against their fears and traditions. The decision they would reach would test the boundaries of their community's adaptability, while challenging their understanding of what it truly meant to live their faith in an ever-changing world. The autumn wind carried whispers through Lancaster County as Samuel Zook found himself caught between two worlds, much like the fallen leaves suspended between earth and sky. The young Amish man had spent the past weeks watching the unlikely friendship develop between his father, Eli, and their English visitor, Elon Musk. Now, in the wake of his father's bold defense of Elon before the community, Samuel recognized his crucial role as a bridge between these seemingly incompatible worlds. Through the kitchen window, Samuel observed his mother Hannah preparing the morning meal, her methodical movements a testament to generations of tradition. Yet his thoughts drifted to the conversations he'd overheard between Elon and his father, discussions of innovation, progress, and the future that both excited and troubled him. How could one remain true to their faith while embracing the possibilities of tomorrow? His uncle Levi's opposition to Elon's presence had created a rift that threatened to divide not just their family, but the entire community. Samuel understood both perspectives, Levi's fear of change and Elon's genuine curiosity about their way of life. The tension reminded him of a rope pulled too tight, ready to snap unless someone found a way to ease the strain. During morning chores, Samuel approached his father in the barn. "Father, I believe I can help with Uncle Levi," he said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Eli paused his work, giving his son his full attention. The morning light filtering through the barn slats illuminated the wisdom in his father's eyes as Samuel continued. I understand his fears, but I also see the value in what we might learn from Elon and what he might learn from us. Eli's response surprised him. Sometimes, Samuel, the strongest bridges are built by those who have walked both shores. The words carried weight, acknowledging Samuel's unique position within their community. As someone who had interacted with the English world more than most, he possessed insights that could help navigate these troubled waters. Samuel began his diplomatic mission by approaching his uncle Levi after Sunday service. Their conversation, though initially tense, revealed Levi's deeper concerns about preserving their way of life. The English world moves too fast, Levi had said, his voice heavy with worry. It leaves no time for reflection, for connection with God. These words echoed in Samuel's mind as he later spoke with Elon, who had been keeping a respectful distance from community gatherings. The businessman's genuine interest in understanding their perspective surprised Samuel. Your uncle's not entirely wrong, Elon admitted. The modern world's pace can be overwhelming. Perhaps that's why I find such peace here. Hannah's quiet influence proved invaluable as she helped Samuel organize a dinner that would bring together the key players in this delicate situation. Her wisdom, shared through subtle gestures and carefully chosen words, reminded Samuel that sometimes the most powerful changes begin with breaking bread together. The evening gathering became a turning point. As Samuel watched his mother serve her famous chicken pot pie, he noticed how the simple act of sharing a meal began to soften the rigid boundaries between tradition and progress. Elon spoke of his own struggles with the relentless pace of technology, while Levi shared stories of how their community had adapted to changes while maintaining their core values. Through careful translation of each side's concerns and hopes, Samuel helped establish a framework for mutual understanding. He explained to the community how Elon's presence could actually strengthen their traditions by providing an outside perspective on their values. To Elon, he illuminated the profound wisdom in their deliberate pace of life and conscious choice of technologies. The process wasn't without its challenges. Some community members remained skeptical, and certain conversations still carried an edge of tension. But Samuel's efforts began to bear fruit as small changes emerged. Levi occasionally nodding in acknowledgement when passing Elon, community elders engaging in thoughtful discussions about selective adaptation, and Elon showing genuine respect for their traditional practices. What emerged was not a compromise of values but a deeper understanding of how different worldviews could coexist and even enrich each other. Samuel's role as a bridge builder had revealed something profound, that progress and tradition need not be adversaries, but could instead be partners in creating a more mindful future. As the harvest season progressed, Samuel noticed a subtle shift in the community's atmosphere. The initial resistance to Elon's presence had transformed into a curious acceptance, though questions remained about how this unusual relationship would shape their future. What other bridges might need to be built? How would this experience influence both their community and their English visitor in the years to come? In the gentle stillness of an Amish kitchen, Hannah Zook's hands moved with practiced efficiency as she kneaded bread dough. Her movements a meditation passed down through generations. Elon Musk, seated at the worn wooden table, found himself drawn into the hypnotic rhythm of her work. The silence between them, rather than awkward, carried its own eloquence. What began as a simple invitation to share morning bread had evolved into an unexpected lesson in the art of presence. Hannah's methodical approach to her task spoke volumes about the Amish philosophy of life, one that stood in stark contrast to Elon's world of rapid innovation and constant connectivity. How could such opposing worldviews find common ground? The quiet was broken only by the soft thud of dough against wood and the distant clip-clop of horses outside. Hannah worked without the need for timers or measuring cups, her expertise embedded in muscle memory and intuition. Elon, accustomed to precision instruments and digital accuracy, watched in fascination as she added ingredients by feel rather than formula. Does thee know? Hannah spoke softly, her words careful and measured. That bread has been made this way since before electricity? Her question carried no judgment, merely observation. The simplicity of her statement challenged Elon's assumptions about progress and efficiency. In his world, newer always meant better, but Hannah's bread-making demonstrated mastery achieved through generations of unchanged practice. The conversation between them unfolded in unhurried fragments, punctuated by long stretches of comfortable silence. Hannah shared insights about community, sustainability, and contentment that seemed revolutionary in their simplicity. Her wisdom wasn't delivered in grand pronouncements but emerged naturally through small observations and thoughtful responses to Elon's questions. As morning light filtered through the kitchen windows, Hannah explained how the Amish community's approach to technology wasn't about rejection, but about careful consideration of impact. Each innovation was evaluated not just for its practical benefits, but for its effect on family and community bonds. This perspective offered Elon a new lens through which to view his own work in technology. The depth of Hannah's understanding surprised Elon. While Eli had become his philosophical mentor and Samuel his cultural bridge, Hannah's quiet wisdom revealed yet another dimension of Amish life. Her insights about the relationship between progress and human connection challenged his assumptions about advancement and happiness. Through their morning together, Hannah demonstrated how the Amish tradition of selective technology use wasn't born of ignorance but of conscious choice. She spoke of how their community had maintained its cohesion by carefully choosing which modern conveniences to adopt and which to decline. Could there be valuable lessons here for the wider world's relationship with technology? The conversation shifted to family dynamics, with Hannah sharing subtle observations about the tension between Eli and Levi. Her perspective on the brothers' disagreement revealed the complexity beneath the surface of Amish life. The community wasn't a monolithic entity, but a living, breathing organism dealing with its own internal struggles and evolutions. As Hannah shaped the bread into loaves, she spoke about change and tradition, about finding balance in an unbalanced world. Her words carried the weight of someone who had thought deeply about these matters while maintaining a practical connection to daily life. The wisdom she shared wasn't theoretical but lived, tested through years of practical application. The morning's interaction left Elon with questions that challenged his fundamental assumptions about progress and human development. Hannah's example suggested that perhaps true innovation wasn't always about adding complexity, but sometimes about maintaining simplicity. Could the future of technology benefit from this perspective of intentional limitation? The fresh bread, when it emerged from the wood-fired oven, represented more than just sustenance. It embodied a philosophy of life that valued process over outcome, community over efficiency, and wisdom over information. As Hannah shared the warm loaf with Elon, the simple act of breaking bread together bridged their different worlds in ways that complex discussions never could. Their morning together revealed how wisdom often speaks most clearly through actions rather than words. Hannah's quiet example demonstrated that understanding doesn't always require extensive dialogue or theoretical frameworks. Sometimes, the most profound insights emerge from simple moments of shared experience and silent observation. The autumn wind rustled through the cornfields as Elon stood at the crossroads of the Zook farm, both literally and metaphorically. His Tesla, parked incongruously beside a horse-drawn buggy, served as a stark reminder of the two worlds colliding in this peaceful Lancaster County setting. After weeks of immersion in the Amish community, the tech mogul found himself wrestling with an unexpected dilemma that challenged his fundamental beliefs about progress and tradition. Hannah Zook's words from their conversation the previous evening echoed in his mind. Sometimes the fastest path forward is to stand still. The simplicity of her wisdom had struck him more profoundly than any corporate strategy session or board meeting ever had. But now, faced with the practical implementation of those words, Elon struggled with their implications for his ambitious plans to bring sustainable energy to the Amish community. The project had seemed straightforward at first, introducing solar panels and battery storage systems that would allow the Amish to maintain their independence while embracing clean energy. Samuel had shown initial enthusiasm, seeing it as a way to bridge his two worlds. Yet Levi's fierce opposition had gained traction within the community, forcing Elon to confront the possibility that his well-intentioned intervention might be disrupting something far more valuable than he'd initially understood. Zook approached silently, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. "Thou seems troubled, friend," he observed, using the formal address that had become familiar during Elon's stay. The patriarch's presence carried the weight of generations, of wisdom, yet remained unburdened by judgment. How had this man managed to maintain such perfect balance between preserving tradition and adapting to necessary change? "Your brother Levi believes I'm trying to destroy your way of life," Elon responded, careful to maintain the respectful tone he'd learned was essential in this community. "Perhaps he's right. Every innovation I've introduced throughout my career has had unintended consequences. What if bringing solar power here does more harm than good?" Eli's response came slowly, measured in the way of one who understood that words, once spoken, could never be recalled. "We are not against progress, Elon. We are for purpose. Each change must serve our community's soul, not just its body." The older man's eyes crinkled at the corners, suggesting deeper thoughts left unspoken. The conversation was interrupted by the approach of Samuel, whose presence embodied the very conflict Elon faced. The young man had spent the past weeks helping translate between the modern and Amish worlds, but his own struggle with identity had become increasingly apparent. "The elders are gathering to discuss the proposal," Samuel announced, his voice carrying a mix of hope and anxiety. What had started as a straightforward business proposition had evolved into something far more complex. The technical challenges of adapting solar technology to Amish requirements paled in comparison to the philosophical questions now facing both Elon and the community. How could one measure the value of tradition against the promise of progress? When did preservation become stagnation, and when did innovation become destruction? Hannah appeared in the doorway of the farmhouse, her quiet presence drawing their attention. She had become an unexpected source of insight for Elon, her seemingly simple observations often revealing profound truths about human nature and community. The way she managed her household demonstrated how efficiency and tradition could coexist without conflict, a living example of the balance he now sought. Levi's arrival created a palpable tension in the group. His opposition to Elon's presence had not diminished over time, but had rather grown more nuanced as he witnessed the subtle changes in his family members. "The elders await," he announced formally, his gaze challenging Elon to defend his proposals before the community's leaders. The moment of decision had arrived. Elon's usual confidence in technological solutions wavered in the face of this community's deep-rooted wisdom. The choice before him was not simply about implementing solar power. It was about recognizing and respecting the delicate balance between progress and preservation, between individual ambition and community welfare. As they walked toward the meeting house, Elon noticed how each member of the Zook family carried themselves. Eli with quiet authority, Hannah with serene wisdom, Samuel with hopeful uncertainty, and Levi with protective vigilance. Their different perspectives represented the complexity of the choice he faced. Would pushing forward with his plans demonstrate respect for the community's future, or would stepping back show greater understanding of their present needs? The answer, Elon realized, might not lie in choosing between tradition and progress, but in finding a way to honor both. Yet how could one navigate such seemingly contradictory paths? The approaching meeting would require more than technical expertise or business acumen. It would demand a deeper understanding of what truly mattered to this community that had, despite itself, begun to matter so much to him. The morning dew settled heavily on the Lancaster County farmland as Elon Musk stood beside his parked Tesla, watching the sun peek through the morning mist. How different this scene felt from his arrival just days ago, when he'd viewed the Amish community through the lens of technological progress and efficiency. Eli Zook approached from the farmhouse, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. "The morning light always shows things clearer," he said, joining Elon in contemplation of the landscape. The wisdom in those simple words struck Elon, How often had he rushed through decisions, pushing forward without pausing to let the morning light reveal what truly mattered? Hannah emerged from the house carrying a basket of freshly baked bread and preserves. "For thy journey," she said softly, pressing it into Elon's hands. The gesture carried more weight than mere hospitality. It represented acceptance, understanding, and perhaps even forgiveness for his earlier missteps. Samuel hung back near the barn, his internal struggle visible in his stance. The young man had served as a bridge between worlds, helping Elon understand that progress wasn't always measured in gigabytes and kilowatts. Would Samuel eventually choose between these two worlds, or had he found his own way to balance them? Levi's absence spoke volumes. The tension between them remained unresolved, yet Elon had come to appreciate how Levi's steadfast opposition had forced him to examine his own assumptions. Sometimes the strongest lessons come from our greatest adversaries. "What I've learned here goes beyond what I expected," Elon admitted to Eli. "I came thinking I could teach efficiency and innovation, but instead—" He paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound trite or superficial. Eli nodded, understanding the unspoken revelation. "Sometimes the fastest path forward requires us to slow down first. Thee has learned to see with new eyes." The conversation shifted to practical matters, but beneath the surface ran deeper currents of transformation. How would this experience influence Elon's future decisions? What unseen ripples would spread through both communities from this unlikely intersection of worlds? Hannah's quiet voice carried unexpected authority as she shared her parting thoughts. "In our way, we measure wealth not in dollars but in relationships, in peace of mind, in connection to land and family. Perhaps there is room for both kinds of riches in this world?" Samuel finally approached, extending his hand. "Will you remember us as more than just an interesting experiment?" The question carried the weight of all their interactions, all the misconceptions challenged and bridges built. Elon's response came from a place of genuine understanding. "I came here seeing limitations, but I leave seeing possibilities. Your community hasn't rejected progress. You've defined it differently. There's wisdom in that I never expected to find." The farewell continued with exchanges of final thoughts and lessons learned, each interaction layered with meaning beyond the simple words spoken. How would these lessons manifest in Elon's future ventures? What would the Zook family take from this unusual intersection with the outside world? As Elon prepared to depart, Eli offered one final observation. "Thee came seeking to change our world? But perhaps the greater change has happened within thyself." The truth of those words resonated deeply. Could the greatest innovations sometimes come not from adding technology, but from understanding when to embrace simplicity? The Tesla's electric motor hummed to life, a sound now striking in its contrast to the peaceful morning. Through the rearview mirror, Elon watched the Zook family grow smaller, standing together in the morning light. Their figure represented not a rejection of progress, but a different kind of advancement, one measured in human connections, sustainable practices, and mindful choices. What began as a mission to modernize had transformed into a journey of personal growth and understanding. As the car merged onto the main road, Elon realized that sometimes the most valuable upgrades aren't measured in processing power or battery life, but in the wisdom gained from unexpected teachers and the courage to question our own definitions of progress. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.